everyone, we are going to be sharing our birth story, or my birth story, with you today. It's been 3 weeks since our baby boy was born on the 12th of November, and I had a positive induction story which actually ended in an emergency C-section, but I still consider it to be a positive birth story just because of how I was feeling and my mental state during the whole of my labour. So I've made some notes on my phone of how things happened and how things progressed from when we went into the hospital to have our induction started. So I'll just grab my phone and then I will talk you through what happened for us and our experience and how our Enzo was born. Our induction was booked in for 41 plus 6 days, so literally the day before he hit the 42-week mark. He was just really snug in there and he just didn't want to come out. And obviously as more time progresses and the placenta, starts to stop working as efficiently, they do encourage you to consider an induction more seriously as you get closer and closer to 42 weeks. I was doing all the things that I could at home to help, bouncing on the birth ball, going for walks, doing like nice relaxing things, and trying to release as much oxytocin as I can and just trying to stay as relaxed as I can. But he didn't want to come out, so we went in on Thursday the 11th morning to have the induction process start. So we arrived at around 11 AM in the morning, and from there until my induction didn't actually get the go-ahead until 3:45 PM because they were a bit short-staffed. So the labour ward had actually told them not to proceed with any more inductions until the go-ahead because they were either too full or didn't have enough staff to cover everyone. So I got there at 11 AM, and between that time and later in the afternoon I had my vitals taken, so pulse, blood pressure and temperature, and also blood tests. I had the COVID PCR test done, which was horrible, like the one which goes right up your nose and feels like it's touching your brain, and also had to do an MRSA test. And then around 3:45 PM they had the go-ahead from the labour ward, because obviously when you have an induction you can't be on the birth centre, you do have to end up giving birth on a labour ward, and in my birth preferences I had stated that my preference would be birth centre, but because of the way things happened, we ended up having to be on the labour ward. This is a quick little hello from Enzo.
Hi Jojo.
Hi Jojo, say hi to the camera.
Say hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Oh, my hair's okay. So after we got the go-ahead, I had a nurse come in to check the fluid level around the baby, and so that was done via an ultrasound, and they also confirmed that his head was down, and they attached me to a CTG monitor to track baby's heart rate for about 60 minutes. So after those 60 minutes were over, the midwife came in and she said that I was actually having contractions, and she asked me if I could feel anything, and I said no. So she said that's good. I was really surprised to hear that I was contracting, and Stefan was as well, and I was quite pleased that something had started, but then obviously I couldn't feel anything and we didn't know how quickly or not quickly that would progress on its own. At 5:45/6 PM, that was around about the time that my pessary was put in, and that is the way that the induction was started. If you don't know what a pessary is, it looks like a tampon, but it's flat, and it has the hormones in, which are called prostaglandins. So after they put the pessary in, they had to monitor baby's heart rate again for about 30 minutes, just to check that there was no bad reaction from the baby's side. And then after we got the all okay for that, I was disconnected. Stefan and I went for a walk around the hospital, and then we came back around 7:10, and by that point, when we got back into our room, Stefan decided that he would go and get some food for us. Obviously, it's really hard to say how the labour is going to progress with any type of labour, how long it will be or how short it will be. So we thought while things are still in a manageable state, we would try and get a meal down us. And then around this time, I started to feel the contractions as lower back pain. So I would get waves of lower back pain, but I would get them quite frequently, but I didn't think it was a problem. And because they weren't too intense, I thought I would be fine to manage and just ride it out, and this is labour starting and it's a good thing. But the midwife did say that if I have 5 or more contractions within 10 minutes to let them know. So after we had some dinner, we did manage to have a nap and have some, like, a few hours sleep, and when we woke up and checked the machine, we could see that I was actually having 5 contractions in 10 minutes. So Stefan decided that he would call the midwife back and ask her to check. And then unexpectedly, at this point, this is when they kind of checked, and then someone came back and told us that, okay, we need to take you up to the labour ward because you're having too many contractions. So obviously I was grateful for the meal, I was grateful that we had a few hours sleep, and then it really felt like something was really happening. So they took me up to the labour ward and they told Stefan to follow with all our bags and stuff. We had spent the whole day in that room, so we had our laptop, we were like watching things, distracting ourselves. It was Stefan's job to repack everything and then follow us up to the labour ward. From this point onwards, I'm not specifically sure about timings. I kind of stopped making notes in the moment on my phone. Later on I made the notes on my phone as much as I could remember. So I think it was around 3 a.m. when we went to the labour ward. I was put back on a CTG monitor to measure baby's heart rate. And one thing I forgot to mention was the whole time during this monitoring, they could see that baby's heart rate would be fine, and then suddenly it would just drop or go high. There was a point where we were eating where it was really high, and the lady was like, oh, maybe that's just because you're eating. And then they kept monitoring for longer, but basically it would be fine and it would just drop, and then fine and then drop. So they put me back on the CTG monitor to measure baby's heart rate. I was given gas and air, which is available on any labour ward, which really helped actually with my contractions, and it made me it gave me some kind of relief to be able to cope with my contractions, as well as like me talking to myself in my head. And I had Stefan play the calming music playlist that I created on YouTube, with some of my favourite songs and things, and he put like LED tea lights around in the labour ward room that we were given. So we, as much as we could, we tried to create the same or similar atmosphere that we would have wanted had we given birth in a birth centre. Lighting was low, music was playing, candles were around. The midwives were really nice, and they used like really hushed voices around us, and like positive language and stuff like that. So they monitored my contractions, baby's heart rate. They said that I was contracting too much, and then a doctor came in and he said that it would be best if my pessary was taken out. So that was taken out, and then they kept monitoring to see if my contractions would slow down. I think they did a bit, but it wasn't enough. So then I was given an injection to slow them down further, because basically I was contracting too much too early. I was only 2 centimeters dilated, I think. So they gave me the injection to slow my contractions down, which worked. And then later on, once things had like calmed down a bit, they broke my waters. So the way they do that is with like a little hook that kind of like scratches at the sac that holds the baby, and the waters break. So around the time that my waters were broken, I was 4 centimeters dilated, so I was making some kind of good progress. After my waters were broken, some of the things we heard the midwives say to us was that they noticed the baby's heart rate would drop during a contraction, so they started to suspect that he may have the umbilical cord around his neck, which obviously when my uterus was contracting was also kind of probably tightening around his neck and causing his heart rate to drop. But they couldn't say for sure, obviously, because they can't see inside. But another thing that they noticed after my waters were broken, that the baby might have done his first poo inside. So they noticed that the fluid that came out had that greenish brownish colour, and they said that there's meconium in the waters, which was another reason why I ended up having an emergency C-section. So meconium and the baby's heart rate dropping with every contraction was the reason that the doctors advised us that the best thing to do would be to have a C-section. Obviously the way that they gave it to us was that it was still our decision, but it was strongly advised. And because of the hypnobirthing antenatal courses we've been doing online, we were really well informed of how things might progress even with an induction. So when it came to the decision to go into the theatre and have the C-section done, and even in the theatre it was still touch and go as to whether we would actually do it or not, because there were points where the baby's heart rate would stabilise and the doctor was like, you know what, he looks fine now. And then they were like, we have two choices, we could leave it for another hour. And also by this point I was 8 centimetres dilated, so I had reached 8 centimetres basically on my own, because after the pessary was taken out my body continued contracting on its own. But the main thing I wanted to get across in this video is that through learning about hypnobirthing breathing techniques and how to be really well informed and ask the right questions, have positive affirmations flowing in your mind. I used several actually hypnobirthing teachers in my run-up to labour and throughout my pregnancy. One of them was the Bump to Baby chapter, which is run by Beth, who's a midwife. So that's a course I paid for myself, and that's the first one I started. And then the second one was the Hypnobirthing and Antenatal course by the Positive Birth Company, which was very kindly gifted to me by them, which was great as well, and that's run by Siobhan Miller. On YouTube I started to listen to positive affirmation tracks by a lady called ANJA, Hypnobirthing by ANJA. And then the last resource I used was I think Bridget Taylor is her name. She's based in San Francisco and she's a birth doula, and she makes loads of really informative videos on YouTube alongside positive affirmation videos as well. So much like ANJA, she makes these really nice videos that you can just play, listen to, and it will have relaxing music in the background. These and just normal calming music were some of the tracks that we had playing while I was in labour. So that really helped me get through every contraction that I had, because it was keeping me in the best frame of mind. And yes, my contractions did get stronger and it did get harder, and there were times where I was like, okay, this is really intense, because obviously with an induction, you know, it's not the same as having a natural birth, whereas you don't have as much time for your body to just get there naturally and like have a slow build up to it. So it does increase how quickly you contract, and also the intensity of your contractions comes a lot sooner, so your body has to deal with that change a lot faster. But I still think we had a positive birth story to tell, because I feel like with all the resources that we used, that I was really well prepared for that situation to occur. So when it was time for us to go to the operating theatre to have the emergency C-section, I was wheeled out in on the bed that I was on, and I was looking for Stefan at this point and I couldn't find him because they had given him scrubs to wear, so he was like mixed in with all these people. And yeah, by this point there was loads of people. I didn't want a ton of people, but obviously I also understood from the courses we've been doing that every single person who's in the room during a C-section has a specific job to do. So it's really important that all those people are there, because it might be one job they have to do, but that's what their focus is. So it's to help the process run as smoothly as possible. And I knew that going in that there would be a ton of people, and yes, there was a ton of people, but I knew that it was all for a purpose, and I knew it was to keep me and my baby safe during the process. So the decision was made to have the C-section in the room. It was confirmed in the room, because there was a point where we weren't sure whether we should go back to the labour ward room and just see how it goes for an hour. But the baby's heart rate again dropped, and the doctor was like, you know what, I think he's telling us, you know, what the decision is, and if you're happy, I would suggest to have the C-section. And then they obviously tell you the risks and everything. At this point I was shaking. I think just with the adrenaline, everything, I did have to move beds during a contraction, which was really hard. I didn't have the gas and air, it was just me. And then they told me that there wasn't enough time for an epidural, because I think it takes about 30 minutes for the epidural to kick in. So they said I would be having a spinal. At the time, honestly, I just was like, do whatever you have to do, because I just wanted the baby to be out and safe and for it to be done. So I had to kind of like bend over like a banana sitting on the side of the bed, and then they put the spinal in, and it worked immediately. They do still test it with like the cold spray, so I couldn't feel anything. So literally within a few seconds I was lying down on the table, they'd put the curtain up, they'd started the process, and within 5 minutes he was born. I couldn't feel a thing. When he was born, they dropped one side of the curtain down and they kind of held him for us to see. Obviously we were both really emotional. First thing I saw was just his head of hair. I didn't see his face straight away because the way they were holding him, I sort of saw the top of his head and then his body. We heard him cry and we were crying, and it was just really emotional, and everything felt worth it, like all the waiting and the decisions and like the pain that I was going through, it all felt worth it. I saw them doing their initial checks on him and they brought him over to me, and we have this really nice video of me meeting him for the first time, and yeah, it was just really positive at the end. And the hospital were amazing, like it happened so fast. We were in the postnatal ward later that day, and then we stayed until the evening of the next day, and then we were discharged to go home. So obviously during that time the feeling starts coming back in my legs, but all I could focus on was my baby. I couldn't stop staring at my baby. He was just so perfect, and I just wanted to just hold him and be with him, and it was the most perfect end to our labour journey, our pregnancy journey as well. Like we just were so happy to see his little face and to hold him and feed him and just to be with him. And we love having him at home. He's just like a ball of joy. He does the cutest things and like the funniest faces, and I'm just really happy with how my pregnancy and how my labour turned out, even though it wasn't what I had written in my birth preferences. And that's the main takeaway that I would say I got from doing an antenatal hypnobirthing course, is the fact that I was just really well prepared, and not only me, the birth partner as well. So Stefan was really prepared. Every bit of information I know, he knew as well. So I felt really well supported and cared for during that time, which I think is really important when you're going through something like pregnancy and labour. So yeah, that's our birth story. I hope this video encourages you if you're having an induction, because I think when you say the word induction, it can make you feel negative straight away, and yeah, it's not ideal, but there are positive induction stories out there. If you look them up, they do exist. Not every induction is a horror story. I really feel like I had a positive induction, and at the end of the day you get your baby to hold. It really does. Everyone says it, but the minute you have your baby there, everything just fades away into the background, and then from then on you just have happy memories to make with your new family member. So that's all I wanted to say. I will put links down below to the resources that I used. That's it from me. So I will see you in our next vlog, and hopefully you'll see a bit more of Enzo as well. And if you don't already follow us on Instagram, we do share our little daily updates on there, on our stories and things, and on our feed as well. So if you don't already follow us, our handle is @stephanandsandra. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next vlog.